Joining me now, Democratic strategist Joel Payne and Republican strategist Rena Shah. Guys, it's so good to see you. Hi. So, Rena, I want to start with you because it's been a big week for President Trump, right? Yeah. He got that rescissions package through. He got the Genius Act signed into law today. But those were largely overshadowed by the Jeffrey Epstein story, that he wants to go away. And part of that is because Republicans on the Hill made it so. So I wonder what you make of all this drama and how Trump has responded to it.
Well, the drama regarding Epstein is, I think, a self-inflicted wound coming from the White House. They haven't messaged well on this. And I think the end of the day, what you're looking at is a case of the GOP worrying that these legislative wins that they've worked so hard to get are being overshadowed by really the sensational headlines that always dominate politics, right? And most Americans are not plugged into the intricacies of what's gone on with this purported client list. Of course, alleged people that are thought to have taken a place in, engaged in activities with Epstein. These are people that, again, have just been alleged to have taken part in a crime. They're named in an affidavit. There's no real client list. But what Trump is trying to do now is get his attorney general to unseal grand jury documents to say...
We have breaking news.
Yes.
He actually just did that.
Okay.
So,
well, that was the kind of thing we weren't sure could happen. But this is what he needed to show that, look, there is no cover up by me. There is no big grand conspiracy here. Now, how this plays out is anybody's guess, because we're not used to this kind of stuff intersecting with what are considered a legislative grand slam. Right. These two big things that happened on Capitol Hill can thought to be sort of unifying, but this was a week in which I think GOP unity came in a pressure cooker. The Genius Act is something that is effectively putting America at the forefront of digital innovation. We've never had an act like this, talking about the regulation of cryptocurrency. Right. That's one good thing. And then with the rescissions package, you only had two Republican, Fitzpatrick and Turner, be holdouts. So this is a moment in which the White House should be celebrating, but they're on the defense again.
And Joel, Rena says it's anyone's guess how this plays out. What is your guess? Is this going to be enough to sort of quell the base that's been demanding more? When I say that, I mean the ordering of, some files be released. And I wonder what you make of Pam Bondi's role in this, because she could have done this already. She also is the one that promised there would be bombshell revelations. So what do you make of this move today to try to show transparency?
Very bottom line about this, the fact that your question, which comes at a week where Donald Trump had, from his perspective, policy wins, cutting things from the federal government. By the way, I'd say that those are things that are going to come back to bite him, but he did that. And a bipartisan crypto bill that you had over 100 Democrats sign. And you can't have a clean conversation about that because of Jeffrey Epstein and because of the mismanagement of this controversy from President Trump, from Attorney General Bondi, and from others. And so, bottom line, politics, Donald Trump does not get the win this week that he sorely needs. Also, this has been a pretty good run for Donald Trump in terms of court victories, in terms of other legislative victories. And yet, if you look at public opinion, it's stagnant at best. And in some cases, he's fallen off. This is as good as it's going to be for Donald Trump, and he's not getting the return that he wants. I'd be really concerned if I was a Republican, particularly one in the White House.
Well, there is a new CNN poll that just came out this week that found Trump's approval rating to be at 42%. That compares to... I'd ask for some of the approvals ratings of former presidents of their first year of their second terms, just to see how that stacks up. So 47% for Obama, 46% for Bush, 56% for Clinton, 58% for Reagan. So this is lower than all of those. Right. Rena, what does that tell you about how, Americans think he's performing?
It speaks to the moment of policy wins not really translating to what could be personality wins, because the personality has always overshadowed the policy with Trump. But when he took office, he promised to be active, and that he's done. But it's not been active in the way that most centrist Americans want. And if we look at overwhelmingly where America is going, it's going to the middle. It's going to the independents. And the independents did not want to see $1 trillion in Medicaid cuts. In our native West Virginia, that is going to sting. rural healthcare is taking such a big hit in this big mega bill that they crammed down the throats of Republicans that didn't even want it in both chambers. I think that was an unforced error, but also look at the win that would just happen the other day, well, actually just a couple days ago, with $9 billion being cut there by the Senate. And that is a drop in the bucket when we talk about federal government spending, but $1.1 billion being cut from National Public Radio, public broadcasting system. People did not want that. As a little girl, again, in Southern West Virginia, I'm here today because of NPR and PBS, and I remained a conservative throughout my life. And so to me, this is a problem in which they got to get out front and explain themselves. They promise slashing federal government spending. It's deeply unpopular when people look at where exactly they're hurting Americans and where states cannot fill in the gaps.
And much of those cuts haven't been felt quite yet. But Joel, this same poll that I just mentioned shows that more than 60% of Americans are opposed to that new domestic policy law. I wonder if you think as time goes on, we'll see people responding even more to that.
Well, you're right. Some of the cuts haven't been felt yet, but some of the impact on rural hospitals and on the overall healthcare system have been felt. And I guess I would just also say Donald Trump, a few weeks ago, along with getting his big, beautiful bill, also bought ownership of the American healthcare system. And he has responsibility for it, similar how Barack Obama, when he passed the Affordable Care Act, had responsibility for it. This is Donald Trump's healthcare system. That means when premiums go up in Michigan, that means when rural hospitals close in Maine and in West Virginia, it's on him. And the American people are going to hold him responsible. And I don't know if Republicans across the country have all accepted that yet, but I can tell you, as somebody who knows what Democrats are thinking about going into the next 15 months, this will be a topic that they make sure voters across the country hear loud and clear.
I'm sure that's true. And before we leave, I want to ask about the UK's new voting age. 16? Could that ever work in the U.S.? Should it ever work in the U.S.?
I don't think so. Look, I'm always somebody that wants more people connected to the ballot box. But before we give ballots to younger people, we need to push civic literacy. Eighth graders, 26% of them are civically literate when you look at certain surveys. And when I think about the future of voting, I think about the great problems we have with people just not understanding what's happening at their local, state, and federal levels. So I am not a proponent of lowering the voting age. I don't think it'll happen here soon, but I am a huge proponent of pushing civic literacy in schools. If
they're old enough to drive, old enough to work and pay taxes, I think they're old enough to vote.
Well, that would be 16. Thank you. Joel Payne and Rena Shah, appreciate your time.